Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's presentation. Tonight's host will be Rebecca Stunholm. At the end of this presentation, she will be answering questions. But in the meantime, if you do have any questions, please type them in the chat. And with that, it's off to you, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We know it's your own personal time, so we really appreciate you taking a few moments to spend some time with us, learn a little bit more about the rate review that's currently in front of the Arizona Corporation Commission, and a few other things we want to share some information with you about water resources and also some customer assistance programs. So with that, I'm just going to jump in here. So we have a brief agenda for this evening. First, we're going to talk a little bit about water resources and, more importantly, water reclamation and how your wastewater service plays an important role in Arizona's water resource management and our future. Talk a little bit about the history of this case, including the order that was given to file it, the regulatory process that it will follow, and what the current numbers look like. And they're proposed. So I want to just ask you all to keep in mind that as we go through this presentation, all of the numbers that you see in this are proposed at this time. They are not in any way final. And so these are just scenarios that we want to share with you so you can understand exactly what we're looking at in this application. We'll talk a little bit about some customer assistance programs, and then we'll open it up for questions. So first, let's give you a bit of a geographical look at the districts or the service areas that are in this application. We have 3 different wastewater service areas here in Arizona. We have one called the Arizona Wastewater District, and that is the blue areas that you see on that map. So while they're not geographically connected, they are one single rate district. So you can see we have a small area up in northwestern Arizona, and then we have the rest of them mainly here in the Phoenix area. Then you're going to see on the far right of your screen an orange section called Rio Verde. So a couple things about this section. First, it is not the Rio Verde that you're hearing about in the news. That is a community a little bit north of the area that we serve, and it's called Rio Verde Foothills. So that's important to note as we walk through this presentation, that the Rio Verde district you see on this screen are our current customers. And there are roughly 2,000 customers in that area. And then if you look further over to the left, you're going to see a green area, and it's called Luke 303. Now, this is a little bit, it looks like it's a large district on paper, but in reality, it's a large geographical area, but currently have 1,000 customers in it, and that will continue to grow over time. All told, we have roughly in the neighborhood of 55 to 60,000 wastewater customers. And what we do is we count the individual account, not necessarily the people in the home. So keep in mind that when we say that number, we're talking about the individual account and not the number of people it's serving. We actually serve close to about 800,000 people in total, and most of them are here in Arizona. So let's talk a little bit about water resources. So imagine EPCOR is a big water bucket, and we're pouring from different sources into that bucket. So this circle graph shows you where our water sources are coming from. And the first thing I want to point out, which is really important, is that we are not dependent on one single source of water. And that's important in terms of water security and making sure that we have a diverse portfolio where if one of those sources is challenged, we're not in an awkward position. We have other sources we can draw from. So if you look at this circle chart, you'll see about 71% of our water resources come from groundwater, and that's from wells that are in the ground. So depending on where you live in the valley or in other parts of Arizona, you may get your water through wells, you may get it through surface water. So this shows you what that breakout is in EPCOR's bucket, if you will. You're going to see a little bit further over in darker blue, 13%, and that's cap water. And the reason I want to point that out is while this application that we're talking about tonight is strictly about wastewater, the important thing to know is we're getting a lot of questions about water resources in general because of all of the headlines that you've seen about the Colorado River and drought and shortage. And the good news is that none of our customers are currently impacted by shortages on the Colorado River. It works on a tier schedule, and we are much further down than where we are today. The other thing to note is that this is 13% of our portfolio. So while it's still very important, it's not the dominant portion of our portfolio, and we have other sources we can draw from. So again, we're not reliant on that single source. Then you're going to see other sources of surface water and stored water. So stored water is water we haven't used, but that we have access to and we're storing it for the future. Other surface water could be things like the Verde River. It could also be Maricopa Water District's water resources. In areas out in Maricopa Water District where that land overlaps with our service area, as that land transitions from agriculture to development, we can use those water resources for those new developments. And then finally, I want to draw your attention to the orange sliver. Now, this may look small in terms of this entire circle. It's 4%. But like what I was saying about the Luke 303 district, where it looks like it's large on paper, but there's a smaller number of customers, the same is true here, but in reverse. So 4%, that's our reclaimed water, and that's where your wastewater service comes into play. So the wastewater that we collect and take away from your homes and your businesses, and I'm a customer as well, we take all of that away and we treat it to an extremely high degree by federal and state standards. And then the water that is purified through that process is taken and reused. So our focus is really on making sure we're looking at the entire water cycle and that we can reuse as much water as possible. In other words, don't waste a drop. So that 4%, I had said it looks small in the circle graph, but it's actually pretty significant. And these numbers give you a good sense of what that looks like. So since 2012, EPCOR has taken 18.2 billion gallons of purified water and we've put it back into the natural water cycle. We've either recharged it into the ground and the underground aquifers, or we have used it for irrigation purposes. Some of it even goes to help cool down Palo Verde and a nuclear generating station. But the really important part to note is that what we're doing is we're taking that wastewater and we're purifying it and we're putting it to good use. And that's an important part of how Arizona has carefully managed water resources historically and moving ahead into the future. Now, if you're like me and 18.2 billion gallons seems like a very nebulous concept, a very easy visual that we can give you on that, here in Arizona, the Cardinals football field in Cardinals Stadium. This is equivalent to covering that football field in a foot of water 55,000 times over. So an extremely large amount of water that's all being returned to that cycle. And your wastewater service is an important part of that. So let's talk a little bit about this rate case, the history, the regulatory process, and kind of give you some bearings before we look at what this might mean for you as a customer and for me as a customer. So first, we're a regulated utility and we're regulated by the Arizona Corporation Commission. And what that means is that we cannot arbitrarily go in and make changes. We have to follow a very regulated process. It's very thorough, very detailed, and it's not done quickly. It's done so that the Arizona Corporation Commission can very carefully look at all of the data for your benefit and to see what is being used, what is useful to you. It's a formal rate application where it lasts roughly 24 to 30 months, sometimes longer, sometimes a little shorter. And that's from the point at which the numbers in this application, that all the data that's collected, all the way through to when the Arizona Corporation Commission will make a decision. Now, the time length from when we file that application to the decision is roughly 12 to 14 months. And so we're in that portion of the process right now. Every single expense, every single cost that has gone into your service and making sure that your system continues to be safe and reliable is in this application. And it's based on a set point in time. We call that the historical test year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And just to give you an idea of how much data is evaluated and looked at, there are 1,300 pages in this particular application. So again, a very thorough analysis of the cost of your service and what it takes to keep it safe and reliable. Customers are going to be given 2 notices as part of this process. There are only really 2 points in time when we're required to tell customers that this application is out there. The first one is after the application has been filed and it's been accepted by the commission. They issue what's called a procedural order, and in that there's language that we send to you as a customer, and it provides you with a high-level overview of this application, some of the projected numbers in there that are being proposed, and it also gives you important information about the timeline and how you can get involved as a customer. Every customer was sent that notice in November of last year, and it came directly through mail to you. But you can also find it on our website. You can also find it on the Arizona Corporation Commission website. So we want to make sure that information is very accessible to you. And I'll talk a little bit about what's in that notice in a second. But first, I also want to point out that the only other time that we're required to give customers notice that this application is pending is actually after the Arizona Corporation Commission has made a decision and new rates are in effect. We really think it's important to go beyond that and make sure that you have information, you have access to us to ask questions and understand this application better. And that's why we schedule these meetings, whether they're in person or they're virtual. These are not required information sessions, but we do them because we think we want to make sure that you have access to that information and you can ask us the questions that are important to you. The entire process is overseen by an administrative law judge. So again, going back to the very careful and thorough due diligence that is done in this application on behalf of you, the customer. The administrative law judge will oversee the entire process and also sets the schedule for the process. And that's information you received in the procedural notice. In that notice in November, what it shared with you was that there are 3 public comment sessions that the Corporation Commission has scheduled, March, April, and May, 1 in each month. And it also set out that the hearing for this application is in June. So you can see that we have quite a bit of time left in this application. This is very early in that process. It shares with you information about how you can get involved, how you can provide your comments, whether that's by phone, by email, or by mail directly to the Commission as they review this application. So before I flip to the next slide, I just want to give you a very high level explanation of what goes into calculating the rates that we all pay for our service. So there are basically 3 components, and I'm oversimplifying the math here. There's a great deal of complex math involved and a lot of data. But if you were to break it into 3 buckets, essentially what is in our rates for service is capital investment, and that's what we have to spend to keep the physical infrastructure running safely and reliably. That's the pipes, it's the valves, it's the lift stations, it's the facilities. So that's an important part of that bucket. The second piece is a modest return on investment that we have an opportunity to earn. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and stress that the word opportunity is actually very important to that and understanding how that works. The third bucket is operating costs. So operating costs are just like you and I having a car that we need to run and maintain, or a home that we're managing. Those are the costs like power and gas to put in your car. For us, it's also chemicals to treat water. It's going to be the labor. It's going to be all of those different components that go into running your service day after day. And those are passed through dollar for dollar. There's no difference. So if the power bill to run a facility is $100, $100 is factored into the rate process. So let's take a dollar bill. So $1 of your wastewater bill. If we broke it out, what exactly is that covering? What is in that dollar? So the first third of that dollar is the capital investment I was just talking about. And that's putting money directly into the infrastructure that's providing your service. It's the pipes that are taking the wastewater away from your home, ensuring public safety, taking it to facilities where it's being carefully treated and purified. It's the lift stations to keep all of it moving along. All of those pieces are capital investment. And much like a car or any other appliance or anything else that you purchase, when you purchase or you install that system, it is brand new. Over time, that system ages. So no matter which area you are in, whether your infrastructure is newer or older, there's always going to be that continuous maintenance and eventually, in some cases and in some areas, replacements. The remaining 2/3 of that dollar are those operating costs that I mentioned. And this is what is going into the day-to-day service that we're delivering. So these, again, this is gas in the vehicles that are going from the facilities. It's the power to generate the facilities. It's chemicals to treat the water. All of those pieces are operating costs. And again, these are passed through dollar for dollar. There is no markup. So when we receive an invoice related to these operating costs, it is factored into your rates exactly as that invoice. So the remaining 3 cents of that dollar is the opportunity to earn an investment. And this dollar is an average across all of our districts. But the 3 cents is a very small piece. And the only place that it's possible to earn that return is on that initial third of the dollar. Now, I want to stress again that it's an opportunity. It's not guaranteed. The Arizona Corporation Commission will review this entire application and they will determine what is an appropriate return on investment. And they will allow us the opportunity, but they will also say it's not guaranteed. So it's really on EPCOR to operate as efficiently and cost effectively as possible for you, the customer. Our focus is safe, clean, reliable service, but we want to do it in a way that is really managing what that can mean for your customer's bill, for your bill as a customer. And we bring the whole dollar back together and you can see how all the pieces fit. So let's talk a little bit about the history of this application. So rates in our Arizona and our Rio Verde wastewater districts are based on what it cost in the year 2015 to provide service. So rates for regulated utilities in Arizona are always historical looking. They're based on a historical test year, a point in time. We take all of that data and we bundle it together and we provide it in that application. So you and I as customers currently are paying for what it cost in 2015 to provide our service. Luke 303, a newer district, was formed in 2016. So similarly, also paying rates that were based on the cost of service at that point in time. So new rates for Arizona, for the Arizona and Rio Verde wastewater districts were set in 2017. That was based on 2015 numbers. So as you can see, we're about 6 to 7 years past the point where the cost of service matches what's in our rates today. So we always lag in time behind what the true cost of our service is going to be. And when they made that decision in 2017 and it phased in new rates over a 5-year period for the Arizona wastewater district, the Arizona Corporation Commission also issued an order that required EPCOR to come back and file a new application. That application is meant to not only update rates to be more current with the current costs, but it also would look at how do we further start to combine other wastewater districts. So this particular application that we filed, we were ordered to file it. It was due in June of 2022. We asked for a small extension to August of 2022, and that new rate review application was filed. And then in November, you received a procedural notice letting you know that it had been filed. So really, as customers, we all want to know, how does this impact our particular monthly bill? So we've got 2 scenarios in this application. The first scenario looks at if we take more current numbers, but we keep the districts the way they are as 3 separate districts, what would that look like for a customer's bill if we were to update based on more current costs? The other scenario looks at the same thing, updating rates to more current costs, but bringing everyone together as one large district. So there are a lot of benefits to having a larger district. A key component of rate calculation is how many customers are in a service area. So the smaller the number of customers, the more impactful it can be on your monthly bill. So when you look at these districts, you can see the Arizona wastewater district is our largest district. And again, roughly 55,000 to 60,000 accounts in that district. In contrast, Rio Verde wastewater has about 2,000 and Luke 303 has about 1,000 at this point in time. Now, certainly Luke 303 is growing over time and we'll see that change, but that's where those districts are today. So if you look at the current rates, you can see all 3 districts pay very different rates for the same type of service today. We deliver the same quality, the same reliability, the same expectation on service to every customer. It does not matter which district you're in or where you're located. But because they're individual districts and their size varies and the point in time when their rates went into effect can vary, the rates that they're paying for that same service can actually differ greatly, and you see that on the screen here. So in the first scenario, which would be to just leave the districts the way they are, we're proposing that based on the more current numbers, that the Arizona wastewater district would see an increase of just under $4, so bringing it to about $42, 42 and change. In Luke 303, however, keeping the district on its own would increase the rate significantly. Now, keep in mind, wastewater is a flat rate. It's not based on the amount of water that you use. So every month, what customers would see is that bill for $210,000. It would not, or propose, it would not matter how much water had been used. And similarly, you see the same thing with Rio Verde. Again, that it would be a more significant impact because it is a smaller district and you would be keeping those costs separated out. The other scenario that we've proposed in this application, which is to bring every customer together into one district so that all of our customers in the state of Arizona are paying the same amount for their wastewater service, would be a significant difference for Luke 303 and for Rio Verde, but in the positive direction. So it'd be a little bit more of an increase to our Arizona wastewater customers, bringing it to $46 and change, still very competitive, still very much in line with rates for service. But it would also help the Luke 303 and Rio Verde customers, bringing their rate down. And so really what you see is you see a much larger district that can share in all of those costs, and that's going to help every customer over time. Every customer system, like I was mentioning earlier, it's going to have needs at different points. At one point, this area over here may need more infrastructure work, and at another point, it may be over here. And sometimes it'll be all at the same time. So really, when you have one large district, it really benefits customers from an economy of scale. Just a couple more slides before we open it up to questions. So this first slide here, this is where I have an opportunity to talk about the men and women in the field who are actually delivering your service every day and protecting public health. So we're really proud of the work that they do. They're very focused on it, very committed. And what we want to do is walk through a few of the recognitions they've received because of that. So this first bullet that you see is actually very, very recent. In 2022, late 2022, we completed a pretty rigorous process where the team at our Anthem Wastewater and Water Facility received the Arizona Division of Occupational Safety and Health Administration's STAR level designation in the Voluntary Protection Program. In short form, what that means is that this facility is operating at extremely high safety and health standards. There are very few private entities or businesses in the state of Arizona that have reached this level. There are roughly 135,000 businesses in the state that would be eligible to do it, and there's less than 100 that have received this designation. EPCOR is the first private utility to have received this, and this is actually our second facility to receive this. So we're very, very proud of this. Again, this reflects the work that our team is doing for you every single day. The next bullet you see is going to be the Water Environment Federation Utility of the Future. Now it says 2020, but this is actually a 3-year designation, and we'll be renewing that this year. This one speaks directly to your wastewater service. So EPCOR has been recognized as a utility of the future today, specifically for our water reclamation work. And that is taking all of the wastewater we collect and again, purifying it and putting it back to good use. In other words, how are we being sustainable? How are we protecting the environment and the water resources? And how are we making sure that that whole water cycle continues? So this is a very important one to us as well. Then you can see an example. So when we do any sort of project, our engineering and operations team, we take it very seriously that they have to be just like we're executing our daily operations. When we're fixing things, when we're repairing things, when we're building things, we want the same level of expertise and excellence applied. So our facilities quite often receive awards such as this one, which is Large Water Project of the Year from the Arizona Water Association. And then finally at the bottom, this is probably the one that means the most to your service. Our team has actually received, it's actually closer to 300 at this point, but more than 200 awards for safety, reliability, and operational excellence. That is speaking directly to the service that you're receiving. That's the men and the women in the field every day that are making sure your wastewater is leaving your home, leaving your business. It's protecting public health, and we're taking it and we're putting it away and putting it to good use. So a little bit about our customer assistance programs, and this is where we can really use your help as customers. We have 4 different programs, but unfortunately, they're never fully subscribed, and we would like to certainly see them fully fully subscribed. So the first program is our low income assistance program. Before I run through all of these, I just want to point out a couple of things. These programs are currently approved and exist in our districts, except for Luke 303 and Rio Verde. We're asking for them to be newly created for those two districts in this application. So should that be approved, once the Arizona Corporation Commission makes a decision, every one of these programs would be available to every wastewater customer we have in the state of Arizona. So the first program is the low income assistance program. So this currently exists for our Arizona wastewater customers. And the eligibility requirement is really quite simple. It's 150% of the federal poverty guideline or less. We're asking for that benchmark to be raised to 200%, and that would make it more accessible to more people. So that's really what we're asking for, is how can we make this easier for people to access? If you're eligible for that program, you can get a $10 credit off your monthly bill. Now, I also want to flip to the other side of the screen and show you the Disabled Veterans Assistance Program. That's also a $10 monthly credit and quite simple to be eligible for. So just simply show us that you are a veteran, you're receiving disability benefits in some fashion. And the reason I want to point those two out together is because you can actually be eligible for both of those programs at the same time. So if you're eligible for low income and disabled veterans, ultimately you will be receiving a $20 monthly credit on your bill. So every month you'd see $20 taken off of your bill. In the middle there is one that we're very proud of. It's actually a recommendation from a member of our team who is a former military member herself. And so we believe it's important that if you're serving our country and you're going to be away from our home, we want to play a role somehow, even if it's a small role, in giving you a little bit of peace of mind. So if you are an active duty service man or woman, and you're going to be any arm of the military, and you're going to be away from your home on deployment, we'll waive your wastewater bill. So what that means is that your service will still be there, but you will not be paying a bill while you're gone. And when you come home, you will simply go from there on. There's nothing owing in arrears. You're out serving our country, and that's an incredibly important duty. We want to provide at least some level of support to you while you do that. And then finally, at the bottom, you see we have a COVID hardship program. So COVID impacted all of us, and some to a greater degree than others. And so during the pandemic, we wanted to find another way that we could provide, again, some level of support to our customers. During the pandemic, we did not disconnect a service to anyone who was unable to pay. But we also created this program, which is a $10 monthly credit. So if you're medically or economically impacted by COVID, it's still accessible, and we want to make sure that we're providing that support. So what comes next? So obviously these in-person and virtual information sessions, we're going to be scheduling a few more towards the end of the month, and you'll find that information on EPCOR.com. But we also have ongoing communication. So we have a website section dedicated to this rate application. That's where you'll find the application itself. You'll find customer information that's been sent directly to you and how to access these sessions, but also the public information sessions that the Arizona Corporation Commission has scheduled. Those sessions are an important opportunity for you to share your feedback, to share your thoughts directly with the commission and the commissioners who will be ultimately reviewing and determining a decision on this application. I mentioned earlier the public hearings. So at this point in time, it's scheduled to begin on June 5th. Hearings can take several days. They can take several weeks. That hearing will be before an administrative law judge, at which point you'll hear a lot of testimony about this application and from other experts, from RUCO, from the organization that is there to represent customers, from staff at the Corporation Commission, from the company, and from others. So the very important part of the process. At the end of that process, the administrative law judge will take all of that information away, including the original application, and we'll look at it, evaluate it, and come back with what's called a recommended order and opinion, or a ROO. Now, we don't have a specific date on when that recommended order and opinion would come back, but based on where we are in the process and a hearing beginning in June, in early June, We expect a decision would probably be in fall 2023 at the earliest. So we wish we could give you a finite date, but at this point, this is the best we can do in terms of timeline. And again, I just want to remind you that the numbers you saw in this application this evening, this is what is proposed in the original application. They are by no means final. And you will see changes over time, usually in the direction of the customer's benefit. So with that, I just want to point out a couple things. So you can report a water emergency to EPCOR 24/7 by calling this number. Our customer care team is available during certain business hours, Monday through Saturday, and you'll find those hours on our website or on your bill. It's actually noted there as well. If you have questions specific to this application, you can email us directly at ratecasequestions@epcor.com. And I want to note there that some questions are easier than others to answer. Some may take us a little bit longer. So please be patient with us. We do look at every inquiry that comes in, and we do spend the time trying to get back to you. So feel free to email us directly. And then finally, if you go to epcor.com, you can find all of this information on there. So with that, I just want to thank everyone again for attending this evening. Before I turn it back over to Andrea, who is going to help us moderate any questions that might have come in.
Thank you, Rebecca. So it does look like we have a couple general questions and
Okay.
then a specific question. We'll start with the general ones. When members of your communities leave for their summer homes, how does this change the wastewater you receive?
Well, when we have people leaving their homes in the summer, obviously there's no wastewater flow necessarily coming out of that home, but we have to keep the system operating no matter whether someone's in that home or not. So when you're paying your monthly bill for wastewater service, you're not just paying for what's happening exactly in your home, which is actually your plumbing. You're also making sure that when you do come back, the system is reliable and it's ready for you. So in terms of flows, we'll see fluctuation over time. In different fluctuations, but it's not going to be as significant as you would think when we have people leave their homes for the summer.
Thank you, Rebecca. The next question is EPCOR looking to expand the Rio Verde community, and how much water goes to livestock and not returned as wastewater?
It's a good question. So earlier I had said, the Rio Verde community in this particular application are our current customers. We don't currently have any plans to extend that service area. It'll be the customers that are there today. And in terms of livestock, I think that would be really difficult for me to answer. Most of the homes and businesses that we serve are going to be in community areas. They're not necessarily going to be livestock or farms or things like that. So it's not possible for me to provide a number on exactly how much of that water is going to livestock, but I can tell you that the Rio Verde community in this application that we serve is not the community where there are ranches and horse properties.
Thank you. And for this next question, somebody wanted to see if you could go back to the dollar breakdown. And in that dollar breakdown, so in the $1 distribution, 32 cents went for capital improvement. What was the 31 cents next major expense used for?
Oh, okay. So it's a great question. I'm actually going to go back a little bit more so we can look at that specific section. So if you look at this portion, you'll see the 31 cents is in there, but you'll also see other portions. Combined, we call these the operating costs. So the 31 cents is called operating costs, but these other pieces also play into it as well. Operating costs would be things like gas for the vehicles, it's chemicals to treat water, it's all of those things, power to run the system. Those are what we consider operating costs, but it also includes things like taxes and insurance. We're a property owner just like anyone else, so we have to pay property tax and insurance and things like that. There's administrative fees, legal fees, regulatory fees, and our debt carrying. So all of those components are what we consider operating costs. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Our next question, and before I get to the next question, I just invite everyone, if you do have questions, please just type them in the chat. The next question is, for the two districts that go up, Rio and Loop, I think they mean the through the
Look through.
yes.
Yeah.
Under the non-consolidated plan, what is the percentage of capital expenses versus operating costs?
That is a very good question. I don't have that number at my fingertips, but we do have, it is in the application. And if you would be able to leave your contact information for us, maybe a private message it to us, we can take that away and we'll get back to you from the rate case questions inbox. I just don't have it at my hands currently.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions at this time? Please type them in the chat.
So while we're waiting to see if any more questions come in, let me just touch on conservation a little bit. So obviously this entire presentation is really primarily based on wastewater. The application doesn't include information on adjustments to the Rio Verde water rates. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that on Monday when we meet with the Rio Verde community. But in general, this application primarily covers wastewater. And we talk about water reclamation and putting water back into the ground or using it for other purposes. But the flip side of that is also water conservation. Like, how can we all as Arizonans and water users be a little bit more wise with the water that we're using and do our part to help? So as a company, we provide a lot of resources to you as a customer. You'll find them in the account portal. You can actually go directly there. We have a program called Water Smart, and it gives you a lot of tools and resources to manage your individual water use. We also have a lot of conservation programming. You'll often find our water resources team out in your community holding workshops. We're in schools, all of those good things. We're at community events. We invite you to come up and chat with us and get some resources. And we also offer free conservation kits to every customer once a year. It's really easy to get one of those. Just email us at conservation@epcor.com and ask for your retrofit or audit kit or both, and that will be sent to you in the mail.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. And at this time, it doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat.
Okay. Well, to the individual who was asking for those numbers, if you wouldn't mind sending us either an email to ratecasequestions@epcor.com so that we can get back to you on that, or including it in the as a direct message in the chat this evening. We want to make sure we answer that question for you. But otherwise, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We know it's your personal time. We really appreciate you taking some time out to sit down with us and hear this information. We want to make sure we're providing as much as we can to you. So with that, have a very good evening, everyone, and feel free to join us at any other meeting or virtual session that we have.